The United States cannot stand by while such atrocities are happening in Nigeria. I am hereby making Nigeria a country of particular concern.
This is Senator Ted Cruz from the state of Texas in the United States of America. The bill he introduces, S-2747, the Nigerian Religious Freedom Accountability Act of 2025, is specific. It mandates Nigeria's designation as a country of particular concern, imposes targeted sanctions on Nigerian officials, maintains pressure on Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa. Cruz's bill has no co-sponsors. This is his project, his cause. And then there is Congressman Riley Moore, who sends a formal letter to the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying the United States cannot stand idly by while believers are slaughtered and must acknowledge the religious nature of the violence. He believes Nigeria has become the deadliest place in the world to be a Christian. He also calls for Nigeria's CPC designation and urges the suspension of all US arms sales until the government protects religious minorities. Nina Shear, a human rights lawyer who has spent 40 years advocating for religious freedom, then coordinates a letter. 30 Christian leaders sign it. Former ambassadors, Catholic bishops, evangelical pastors, Baptist leaders. They address it to President Donald Trump. Even those outside our faith, they said, citing Bill Maher's recent comments, recognize the atrocity of what is happening in Nigeria. But before all of this, there was a hearing.
The purpose of this hearing is to discuss the deteriorating state of religious freedom in Nigeria and the urgent need to redesignate Nigeria as a country of particular concern.
It was convened by Representative Chris Smith. He has held 8 of these since 2012, more than any other member of Congress. The witnesses are carefully selected. Nina Shear from Hudson Institute, Tony Perkins, former chair of the US Commission on International Religious Freedom and current president of the Family Research Council, Bishop Wilfred Anigbe from Nigeria. They all say the same thing. Nigeria's Christians face systematic persecution. The violence is religious. The government is complicit or incompetent. America must act.
Donald Trump says he's asked the US Defense Department to prepare for potential military action in Nigeria.
Within weeks, September through October 2025, Nigeria goes from a largely ignored crisis to the center of American political attention. But here's what you need to understand. This didn't happen by accident. This moment, this sudden explosion of concern is the culmination of a 15-year campaign, a coordinated effort by a network of politicians, think tanks, advocacy organizations, and special interests, all building toward this. The question isn't whether their concern is genuine. Some of it certainly is. The question is, why now? After 15 years of violence, does this campaign finally break through? And who benefits from what comes next? This is a story like no other. This is an investigation to answer a deeply troubling question. Is the United States on a secret plot to invade Nigeria? To understand what's happening now, you need to see how we got here. The story begins in 2009, when Boko Haram transformed from a fringe religious movement into a violent insurgency. Clashes between the group and Nigerian security forces killed hundreds. The group's founder, Mohammed Yusuf, was executed in police custody. His followers went underground, then re-emerged with a campaign of bombings and assassinations. While all this happened, the United States, under its first black president, didn't flinch. Throughout 2010 and 2011, Boko Haram bombed police stations, attacked military barracks, and began targeting churches. On Christmas Day of 2011, they bombed St. Teresa Catholic Church, killing 37 worshippers. Still, Washington hesitated. In 2012, Representative Peter King and Patrick Mahan pressured Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to designate Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization. Well, the State Department resisted. Some officials argued the group didn't pose a direct threat to the United States. Others worried designation might be counterproductive, elevating Boko Haram's status and complicating diplomatic relations with Nigeria. This was when Representative Chris Smith held his first congressional hearing on religious persecution in Nigeria. It was July 2012. Archbishop Ignatius Kaigema testified about violence that had claimed 58 lives. The language was careful: persecution, terrorism, sectarian violence, not genocide. It wasn't until November 13, 2013, the day before another congressional hearing, that the State Department finally designated Boko Haram and its splinter group Ansaro as foreign terrorist organizations. The reluctance reflected genuine debate within the Obama administration about how to characterize what some viewed as primarily a local grievance-driven insurgency, not international terrorism. Then came April 14, 2014, the Chibok kidnapping. 276 schoolgirls, mostly Christians, some Muslims, abducted from their dormitory in Borno State, taken into the Sambisa forest. The Bring Back Our Girls campaign went global. First Lady Michelle Obama held a sign, celebrities tweeted, and the world watched. President Obama deployed a multidisciplinary team, military personnel, law enforcement advisors, hosted negotiation experts, intelligence officials. The US provided surveillance assets to help locate the girls. But even then, the framing remained counter-terrorism and humanitarian crisis, not religious persecution. However, between 2015 and 2019, the narrative sort of began to shift. Open Doors International's World Watch List rankings showed Nigeria rising year after year. By 2016, Nigeria was in the top 10 most dangerous countries for Christians. By 2019, it was in the top 15. The Heritage Foundation began publishing reports on Nigerian Christian persecution. Ina Shea wrote commentary pieces. The Family Research Council, under Tony Perkins, increased its Nigerian advocacy. The language began to evolve, from persecution now to massacre, from terrorism to slaughter, from sectarian violence to systematic targeting, but still no genocide. Well, that changed on January 30th, 2020. Christian Solidarity International issued a formal genocide warning for Nigeria. It was the first major organization to officially use genocide terminology. John Ebner, CSI's president, declared, quote, "The conditions for genocide exist in Nigeria." And then the Hudson Institute's Leila Gilbert published a report in February 2020 titled, "Is the World Ignoring a Christian Genocide in Nigeria?" For the first time, genocide wasn't a question, it was now a statement. The tipping point came 10 months later. December 7, 2020, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern for religious freedom violations under the International Religious Freedom Act. Nigeria became the first democracy ever to receive this designation. The Trump White House issued a statement saying the United States is deeply concerned by religion-based violence in Nigeria, particularly the killing and persecution of Christians. Millions of Nigerians have continued to live in fear for their lives, they said, and several thousands have been brutally murdered because of their faith. The US Commission on International Religious Freedom, which had recommended this designation annually since 2009, celebrated. After 11 years of recommendations being ignored, finally the executive branch had acted. For religious freedom advocates, this was vindication. Then came the reversal. November 15, 2021, the new Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, removed Nigeria from the country of particular concern list. The announcement was brief. Nigeria, quote, "does not meet the legal threshold for designation," Blinken stated. The Biden State Department emphasized that Nigeria was roughly evenly divided between Muslims and Christians, and violence affected both communities. They attributed the violence to climate change and resource conflicts rather than religious persecution. The timing of this was notable. The announcement came just days before Blinken's first visit to Africa. The backlash was immediate and organized. On December 8, 2021, less than a month after the removal, a coalition of 47 religious freedom groups and individuals sent a letter to President Biden demanding redesignation. Signatories of this letter included former Ambassador Sam Brownback, former Representative Frank Wolf, Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council, Nina Shear of the Hudson Institute, and there is Archbishop Benjamin Kwashi of Nigeria. USCIRF expressed outrage. The commission statement called the decision without justification. David Curry, CEO of Open Doors, declared this is not only a baffling error, it's likely in direct violation of the International Religious Freedom Act. Throughout 2022, 2023, and 2024, the campaign sustained pressure. USCIRF recommended Nigeria for CPC designation every single year, 2021, 22, 2023, and 2024. And every year, the Biden administration ignored this recommendation. The House Foreign Affairs Committee passed House Resolution 82 in February 2024, calling for a designation. The resolution never reached the House floor for a full vote. Chris Smith held more hearings. Advocacy groups published more reports. Open Doors 2023 report claimed Nigeria accounted for 89% of Christians martyred worldwide. The 2024 report revised this to 82%. The numbers grew. The rhetoric intensified, but the Biden administration held firm. Well, until September 26, 2025, a new sheriff is now in town.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President-elect Donald J. Trump.
Bill Maher, the comedian, an atheist known for criticizing religion, devoted a segment to Nigerian Christian persecution. He claimed over 100,000 Christians had been killed since 2009. He said 18,000 churches had been burned. He called it so much more of a genocide attempt than what is going on in Gaza. Then he said something that made the clip go viral.
Because the Jews aren't involved. That's why. It's the Christians and the Muslims. Who cares?
This particular segment hit conservative media like a bomb. Fox News ran it repeatedly. Christian broadcasting networks shared it. Conservative social media amplified it. Religious freedom advocates cited it as proof that even secular liberals recognized the crisis. Within weeks, everything accelerated. In September, Ted Cruz introduced his bill. October, Riley Moore sent his letter, and then October 15th, Nina Shear's letter with 30 signatures went to Trump. Till in the same October, reports emerged that this guy, Eric Prince, founder of Blackwater, had appealed for funding to deploy mercenaries to protect Nigerian Christians. By late October 2025, Nigeria was everywhere. Congressional hearings, news segments, op-eds, advocacy campaigns, even fundraising appeals. After 15 years of advocacy, the narrative had finally broken through to mainstream consciousness. This is the timeline. But timelines only tell you when, they don't tell you why. Well, for that, we have to look at several factors that converged in 2025 to create this moment. First, Trump's return to the White House. When Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election, religious freedom advocates saw this as an opportunity. Trump's first administration had designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern in December 2020. His Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had been receptive to their pressure. Biden's removal of the designation in 2021 had been a setback, but now Trump was back, and with him came the possibility of reversing Biden's decision. The advocacy network activated. And then second, Nigeria's political vulnerability. You see, President Bela Tinubu took office in May 2023. He is a Muslim from the southwest, governing a country split between Christian and Muslim populations. His administration featured a Muslim-Muslim ticket. His administration also inherited massive security challenges and has struggled to contain the violence. There are also certain corruption reports on the Nigerian president, with some alleged report of his criminal dealings back in the days when he was in the United States. So Tinubu, you see, is vulnerable to international pressure. The designation of Nigeria as a CPC would be politically damaging. He suggests his government is persecuting Christians or failing to protect them. It opens the door to sanctions, restrictions on aid, and international isolation. In fact, some Nigerian officials believe opposition elements within Nigeria have deliberately fed the genocide narrative to Western actors as a way to undermine Tinubu's government, although I don't believe this part is true. Well, but whether or not you believe this allegation, the timing is quite suggestive. The narrative intensified precisely when Tinubu's government was most vulnerable. And then we have the third factor, fresh atrocities. The Yelewata massacre in June 2025, with over 250 people killed in a single night, provided new ammunition. The Bokos attacks in March and April 2025, over 100 people dead, were extensively documented. These incidents gave advocacy groups fresh testimony, fresh imagery, fresh urgency. When Bill Maher cited statistics in September, he was drawing on reports about 2025 violence that felt immediate and undeniable. The fourth factor here is strategic realignment. In 2023, Nigeria joined BRICS, the economic bloc led by China, Russia, Brazil, India, and South Africa. Nigeria has also explored energy deals with Russia and accepted Chinese investment through the Belt and Road Initiative. For Washington, this represents a strategic problem. Nigeria, you see, is Africa's largest economy and most populous nation. Its alignment matters in the great power competition with China. Some analysts even suggest the Southern American interest in Nigeria's human rights situation conveniently coincides with Nigeria's pivot towards US rivals. By highlighting atrocities and pushing for sanctions, the US can exert pressure at a moment when Nigeria's cooperation matters. And for the fifth factor, we have domestic politics. For Republican politicians, championing persecuted Christians abroad energizes the evangelical voter base. It provides a seemingly unassailable moral position. I mean, who can defend ignoring genocide? Senator Cruz's introduction of legislation allows him to position himself as a defender of religious freedom. It appeals to his Texas constituency, which has a strong evangelical presence. Cruz doesn't necessarily care about Nigeria. I mean, take a look at this clip of him talking about Iran when he was proposing US intervention in Iran. He knew nothing about the country.
How many people live in Iran, by the way? I don't know the population. You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
So this new position distinguishes him from what he frames as a Biden administration's weak response. Similarly, Representative Moore from West Virginia, a state with minimal Nigerian diaspora but strong evangelical political influence, he gains credibility with religious voters by leading on this issue. The issue also provides ammunition to criticize Biden. Removing Nigeria from the CPC list in 2021 can be portrayed as capitulation, weakness, prioritizing diplomatic relations over human rights. And no, I am not a Biden defender here. The sixth factor is Bill Maher's unexpected intervention. The comedian's September segment was crucial because it broke the issue out of the religious freedom echo chamber. Maher is known for criticizing religion. He's liberal, atheist, not aligned with evangelicals. His willingness to call Nigeria a genocide and compare it to Gaza gave the narrative bipartisan credibility. Advocacy groups immediately seized on this. Even secular liberals see the truth. The clip going viral brought Nigeria to audiences who would never watch a USCIRF hearing or read a Family Research Council report. This was the mainstream breakthrough the campaign had needed for years. All of these factors, Trump's return, Tinubu's vulnerability, fresh massacres, strategic competition with China, domestic political calculations, and Maher's viral moment, they all converged in September and October 2025. So what had been a 15-year advocacy campaign suddenly had new momentum. And behind that momentum was a network that had been building infrastructure, coordinating messaging, and waiting for exactly this moment.
President Trump tonight is threatening to take action against Nigeria for what he says is the persecution and killing of Christians.
Now, to understand how the Nigerian narrative broke through, you need to understand who has been building it. This isn't a grassroots concern. It's not spontaneous outrage. It is an organized, well-funded, politically connected network that has been advocating for US intervention in Nigeria since 2009. At the center are three types of actors. Number one, politicians. Number two, government commissions. And number three, advocacy organizations. Let's start with the politicians. Senator Ted Cruz is the current public face, but he's not the originator. We have this guy, Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey. He has been the longest and most consistent congressional champion of this cause. Since 2012, Smith has held 8 hearings on religious persecution in Nigeria. He has visited judges in Nigeria multiple times. He has met with survivors. He has made this issue his signature foreign policy focus. Smith chairs the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Africa. He authored the Frank R. Rove International Religious Freedom Act, which expanded monitoring and accountability for religious freedom violations globally. In March 2025, Smith held another hearing, the latest in his 13-year campaign. The witness list was carefully curated to present unified testimony. We had Nina Shear from Hudson Institute. There was Tony Perkins, Family Research Council and former USCIRF chair. Bishop Wilfred Anagbe from Nigeria and Oge Onubogu, Wilson Center. All except Onubogu delivered aligned testimony emphasizing religious persecution, calling for CPC designation, and criticizing Biden's 2021 removal. They cited the same data source: Open Doors World Watch list, USCIRF reports, Genocide Watch assessments. Smith has introduced House Resolution 220 calling for CPC designation and co-sponsored multiple bills conditioning US aid to Nigeria on religious freedom improvements. Well, Ted Cruz joined the campaign in September 2025 with his Nigeria Religious Freedom Accountability Act. The bill goes beyond recommendation. It would mandate CPC designation and impose specific sanctions on Nigerian officials who enforce Sharia or blasphemy laws. Cruz framed his legislation in stark terms. Quote, officials in Nigeria are ignoring and even facilitating the mass murder of Christians by Islamist jihadists. Representative Riley Moore, elected to Congress in 2024 from West Virginia's 2nd District, he quickly made Nigeria his issue as well. His October 2025 letters to Secretary of State Marco Rubio called Nigeria, quote, the deadliest place in the world to be a Christian, and urged suspension of arms sales. Moore represents a state with virtually no Nigerian diaspora population, but West Virginia has strong evangelical political influence, and Moore stance aligns with religious conservative priorities. The pattern is clear. Every congressional champion is Republican. Every single one. So, this isn't like a bipartisan concern. It's a Republican cause championed by politicians with strong evangelical constituencies. Then there is the Commission. The US Commission on International Religious Freedom provides the campaign with government legitimacy. USCIRF is an independent bipartisan federal commission created by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. 9 commissioners serve 2-year terms, 3 appointed by the President, 3 appointed by Senate leadership, and 3 by House leadership. USCIRF's mandate is to monitor religious freedom violations worldwide and recommend which countries should be designated as, quote, countries of particular concern. Well, on Nigeria, USCIRF has been consistent. They have recommended CPC designation every single year since 2009. That is 15 consecutive years of recommendations. Several USCIRF commissioners have been central to the Nigeria campaign. Tony Perkins served from 2018 to 2022, including terms as vice chair and chair. During his tenure, Perkins made Nigeria a priority. After leaving USCIRF, he returned to the Family Research Council as president and continued advocating for Nigeria designation from outside government. Then we had Nadine Mainza, who served as USCIRF chair and pushed aggressively for Nigeria's designation. Well, after Trump designated Nigeria in 2020, she celebrated it as a victory. But after Biden removed the designation in 2021, she condemned it. The personnel crossover is important. People serve on USCIRF, become commissioners with official titles, then return to advocacy organizations where they cite their government service as credentials. USCIRF's annual reports provide data and analysis that advocacy groups cite extensively. The Commission holds hearings, publishes country updates, and issues press releases. And because USCIRF is technically independent and government-funded, its recommendations carry more weight than those of private advocacy groups. Politicians often cite USCIRF to justify their positions. Media outlets quote USCIRF as an authoritative source. But USCIRF commissioners are political appointees. They are not neutral bureaucrats. They are advocates who bring ideological perspectives to their work. And on Nigeria, USCIRF has functioned as part of the advocacy network pushing for intervention. So, how are the think tanks? Behind the politicians and commissioners are the organizations doing research, publishing reports, and organizing campaigns and fundraisings. The Hudson Institute's Center for Religious Freedom, led by Nina Shear, has been central to all of this operation. Shear is a 40-year veteran of human rights advocacy. She served on USCIRF from 1999 to 2012, appointed by 4 different presidents over 13 years. Since joining Hudson, she has made Nigeria a primary focus. She testified at the March 2025 congressional hearing. She organized the October 2025 letter to President Trump signed by 30 Christian leaders. She has published extensively on Nigeria, hosted conferences for Boko Haram survivors, and provided expert analysis to media outlets. In 2023, she received the Bradley Prize from the Bradley Foundation, a $250,000 award honoring, quote, outstanding achievement in advancing conservative causes. Hudson Institute receives funding from conservative foundations but doesn't fully disclose its donors. Then we have the Family Research Council under Tony Perkins. They have made Nigeria a signature issue. FRC released major reports including the crisis of Christian persecution in Nigeria, a July 2020 report, and why Trump should label Nigeria a country of particular concern, a report published in June 2020. FRC's funding reveals the ideological and financial networks behind the campaign. In 2014, the Eja and Elsa Prince Foundation, the family foundation of Betsy DeVos and Eric Prince, donated $1.4 million to FRC. Then there is the National Christian Foundation, described as, quote, a secretive organization often used as a conduit to funnel money to other conservative charities. They also provide major support for this cause. The Donors Capital Fund and Christian Community Foundation channel anonymous contributions through donor-advised funds. The 13 Foundation, run by Faris Wilkes and Dan Wilkes, brothers who made billions in the fracking industry, funds FRC and similar organizations. FRC reported millions in contributions in recent years. Its 501c4 lobbying arm, FRC Action, advocates legislatively while the 501c3 maintains tax-exempt status. Open Doors International drives much of the statistical narrative. Their annual World Watch list ranks countries where Christians face persecution. And in recent reports, Open Doors claims Nigeria accounts for 82% of Christians killed for their faith globally. They report over 7,000 Christians killed in Nigeria in just the first 220 days of 2025. Open Doors launched the Arise Africa campaign 2024 to 2028, a multi-year global initiative focusing on violence against Christians in sub-Saharan Africa. The campaign calls for a UN Commission of Inquiry and is collecting petition signatures for presentation to the African Union, EU, and UN by 2026. Open Doors relies primarily on individual donors from the American evangelical community. They market themselves as serving persecuted Christians around the globe with 100% of your gifts going directly to programs. And then there is International Christian Concern, ICC, which provides similar data and advocacy. Their 2025 Global Persecution Index places Nigeria prominently. ICC reports 3,100 Christians killed in Nigeria in 2024. Genocide Watch, funded by Gregory Stanton, provides academic credibility. Stanton developed the 10 stages of genocide model. Genocide Watch categorizes Nigeria at stage 9. Extermination, and stage 10, denial. This classification, adopted by no major international body, gets cited extensively by congressional advocates to suggest genocide is occurring. And then we have the Catholic Network, which provides institutional support, aid to the church in need. Catholic News Agency, Catholic World Report, and Vatican News provide extensive coverage. Bishop Wilfred Anabe served as the emotional centerpiece of congressional testimony, describing violence as a strategy to, quote, reduce and eventually eliminate the Christian identity in Nigeria. He testified that 145 priests had been kidnapped in the past decade, with 11 killed. So, my question is, how is this network coordinating their efforts? You see, the network's coordination becomes visible at key moments. The March 12, 2025 congressional hearing is a perfect example. 4 witnesses testified: Nashir from Hudson Institute, Tony Parkins from Family Research Council, former USCIRF chair, then Bishop Wilfred Anabe from Nigeria, and Oge Onubogu from Wilson Center. 3 of the 4 delivered perfectly aligned testimony, emphasized religious persecution as the primary driver, called for CPC resignation, criticized Biden's 2021 removal, cited identical data sources from Open Doors, USCIRF, Genocide Watch, and they used the same terminology. Systematic targeting, genocide, extermination. This wasn't accidental convergence. It was coordinated advocacy. And the personnel overlaps create an echo chamber. Tony Parkins moves from USCIRF, which is a government commission, to Family Research Council, which is advocacy organization, to Congressional Witness Stand. He cites USCIRF reports that he helped produce. He advocates for designation he recommended as a commissioner. And then we have Nashir, who moves from USCIRF, serving from 1999 to 2012, to Hudson Institute, to Congressional Witness, to letter organizer. She served on the commission. Now she advocates from outside. She testifies to Congress, and now she cites her former colleagues' reports. Both cite each other's organizations in their testimony. Hudson Institute reports reference FRC findings. FRC publications cite Hudson Institute research. USCIRF reports draws on both. The network amplifies its own message through multiple institutional voices that appear independent but share personnel, funding, and ideology. The October 2025 letter to Trump exemplifies this coordination. Nashir organized it. 30 Christian leaders signed: Catholic bishops, evangelical pastors, former ambassadors, non-profit executives. The letter cited Bill Maher's comments, using a secular liberal's words to argue for bipartisan concern. He then called for immediate CPC redesignation, referenced USCIRF's recommendations, cited Open Doors statistics, and invoked Genocide Watch's classification. Within 2 weeks of the letter going out, Cruz introduced his legislation. This is orchestration, not organic activism. The advocacy groups provide research. USCIRF provides government credibility. Politicians provide legislative vehicles. Media appearances amplify the message. And then there are fundraising appeals that convert attention into donations. It's a closed loop at this point. However, understanding the network requires following the funding. So let's follow the money. Most of these organizations avoid full financial disclosure. They are registered as 501c3 non-profits, which must file IRS Form 990 but don't have to reveal individual donors. What we can see reveals a web of conservative philanthropic funding. The Prince Devils family connection is significant here. Eric Prince, founder of Blackwater, who also ran Frontier Services Group and other security ventures, comes from a family deeply embedded in conservative Christian politics. His sister, Betsy Devils, served as Trump's Secretary of Education. Their father, Eja Prince, built a fortune manufacturing auto parts. The Eja and Elsa Prince Foundation has donated millions to conservative Christian causes. The same Eric Prince, who donated to FRC, is now proposing to send mercenaries to Nigeria. The connection is not coincidental. The Wilkes brothers, Faris and Dan, made billions in the fracking industry. Through the 13 Foundation, they fund a network of conservative organizations, including FRC. The National Christian Foundation operates as a donor-advised fund manager, allowing wealthy conservatives to donate anonymously while directing grants to specific organizations. The Donors Capital Fund serves a similar function, channeling anonymous contributions to conservative non-profits. Bradley Foundation, one of the largest conservative philanthropies, gave Nina Share its Bradley Prize in 2023, $250,000 plus ongoing institutional support for Hudson Institute. Conservative Transparency, a database tracking right-wing funding networks, has identified partial funding flows. But most organizations protect donor anonymity. What is clear is that the same pool of conservative philanthropic money funds multiple nodes in the network. Think tanks like Hudson Institute producing research, advocacy groups like FRC and Open Doors publishing reports and organizing campaigns, legal organizations defending religious freedom cases, media outlets amplifying the narrative, even political action committees supporting candidates who champion these causes. The financial incentives also matter here. Dramatic persecution narratives generate donations from American evangelicals. Open Doors, ICC, Save the Persecuted Christians, and other organizations fundraise by highlighting the most extreme cases. Christians are being slaughtered raises more money than Nigeria faces complex security challenges affecting multiple communities. The more dramatic the narrative, the more urgent the appeal, and the more money flows in. For some organizations, Nigeria advocacy is their entire business model. Their institutional survival depends on maintaining donor concern. This doesn't mean the organizations are cynical or their concern is fake. Many people involved genuinely care about persecuted Christians, and I want to believe they want to help. But the incentive structure rewards simplification. It rewards dramatic framing. It rewards narratives that mobilize donors, not nuance that might complicate the story. And above all, it creates alignment between organizations that might otherwise have different priorities. Defense contractors want weapons sales. Oil companies want to protect investments. Private military companies want contracts. Conservative politicians want evangelical votes. Think tanks want influence. Advocacy groups want donations. Nigeria provides an opportunity where all of these interests align under the humanitarian banner. But let's pause here for a second. If the advocacy is toward putting an end to Christian massacres and the gruesome violence in Nigeria, why is it concerning? Or why not get behind it? Well, the simple answer to that is history.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I authorize the Armed Forces of the United States to begin a limited military action in Libya in support of an international effort to protect Libyan civilians.
The current narrative of Christian genocide requiring American intervention represents a dramatic shift from how the US government talked about Nigeria for most of the past 15 years. The evolution reveals how framing changes to serve political priorities. Let's look at the Obama era from 2009 to 2016. There was some sort of reluctant engagement. When Boko Haram first emerged violently in 2009, the Obama administration treated it as a local Nigerian security problem, not an American concern. Even as the group bombed churches and police stations, even as they declared allegiance to Al-Qaeda, the State Department resisted designating them as a foreign terrorist organization. Representative Peter King and others pressured Hillary Clinton in 2012 to designate the group. The State Department stalled, arguing designation might be counterproductive, elevating Boko Haram's profile and complicating relations with Nigeria. Only in November 2013, after intense congressional pressure, did the designation finally happen. Meanwhile, Nigeria was seeking weapons to fight Boko Haram. The government wanted attack helicopters, advanced munitions, intelligence support. The Obama administration blocked sales, citing the Leahy Law, which prohibits military assistance to foreign units that commit human rights violations with impunity. Nigerian forces had been credibly accused of extrajudicial killings, torture, and mass executions of suspected Boko Haram members. So the US said, reform your military, stop the abuses, then we'll provide weapons. From the Nigerian perspective, America was lecturing them about human rights while their soldiers were being slaughtered by jihadists. The Chibok kidnapping in April 2014 forced deeper US engagement. Obama deployed advisors, provided surveillance assets, and publicly committed to helping Nigeria. But when the Nigerian Air Force bombed a civilian camp at Ran in January 2017, killing between 100 and 236 civilians and aid workers, with US intelligence reportedly contributing to the targeting, Obama immediately froze the pending Super Tucano aircraft sale. The message then changed to, "We will help, but only if you meet our standards." Then Trump arrived.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with President Buhari of Nigeria. We've had very serious problems with Christians who have been murdered, killed in Nigeria. We're going to be working on that problem.
During the first Trump era between 2017 and 2020, there was security partnership, albeit with strings attached. Trump's administration approved the Super Tucano sale in August 2017. Moving forward, despite the Ran massacre, the State Department justified it, saying this aircraft will support Nigerian military operations against terrorist organizations such as Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa. When President Buhari visited the White House in April 2018, Trump said Nigeria had come a long way and emphasized that the US was more and more not interested in being the policeman of the world. The rhetoric suggested partnership, not intervention. But behind the scenes, religious freedom advocates were pressing the Trump administration to recognize Christian persecution specifically. By December 2019, the State Department placed Nigeria on a special watch list for religious freedom violations, a step below CPC designation. Then came December 2nd, 2020. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo designated Nigeria as, quote, a country of particular concern, the first democracy ever to receive this designation. The Trump White House statement marked a rhetorical transformation. The United States is deeply concerned by religion-based violence in Nigeria, particularly the killing and persecution of Christians. At this point, the framing had changed. Not terrorism affecting all Nigerians, not insurgency in the Northeast, not farmer-herder resource conflicts, persecution of Christians. And then we had the Biden era of 2021 to 2025. Biden's November 15, 2021 removal of Nigeria from the CPC list attempted to restore some form of nuance. Secretary Blinken's State Department emphasized Nigeria was roughly evenly divided between Muslims and Christians. Violence affected both communities, and conflicts stemmed from climate change and resource competition. The Biden administration maintained that characterizing Nigeria's crisis as targeted religious persecution oversimplified reality and ignored Muslim victims. But Biden continued security assistance. The Super Tucano aircraft ordered under Obama, approved by Trump, were finally delivered in August 2021 under Biden. In April 2022, the administration approved a $997 million sale of 12 AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters. The sale had been held up for 14 months by Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which expressed concerns about human rights. It was released after the administration added $25 million for human rights training. This became the pattern. Acknowledge human rights concern, add training funds, approve weapon sales anyway. The shift from one administration to the next reveals how the narrative serves different political purposes. Under Obama, this is terrorism, will help, but you must stop human rights abuses. Under Trump, this is Christian persecution, we designate you as violators. And under Biden, this is complex, climate, resources, governance, not just religion. Now with Trump returning in 2025, the pressure to restore the Christian persecution framing has yet again intensified. The facts on the ground haven't fundamentally changed. The violence continues. Both Christians and Muslims continue to die. But the American narrative shifts based on who is in power and what political purposes the framing serves. And then there is something else. Here's what the narrative about Christian genocide in Nigeria conveniently ignores. American assistance over the past 2 decades has failed to protect Nigerian civilians and has often enabled the forces killing them. Since 2000, the United States has provided approximately $1.5 to $2 billion in security assistance to Nigeria. The money bought weapons, training, intelligence support, equipment, and advisory services. What it didn't buy was accountability, civilian protection, or effective counterinsurgency. The weapons sales tell one story. The A-29 Super Tucano aircraft, $593 million for 12 close air support planes, approved by Obama in 2015, put on hold in January 2017 after Nigerian airstrikes killed 115 civilians. Reapproved by Trump in August 2017, despite the massacre finally delivered by Biden in August 2021. And then there's the AH-1Z attack helicopters, $997 million for 12 aircraft, proposed in 2020, held by Senate Foreign Relations Committee for 14 months due to human rights concerns, released in April 2022 after $25 million added for human rights training, contracted despite ongoing civilian casualties from Nigerian airstrikes. The pattern keeps repeating itself. Identify concerns, impose brief holds, add training funds, deliver weapons, document new casualties. The civilian toll from Nigerian military operations using US-provided equipment and training is quite staggering. January 2017, Ran, Borno State, 115 civilians killed. US intelligence reportedly contributed to the targeting. The Nigerian Air Force thought they were bombing Boko Haram. They hit a displaced person's camp. December 2022, Motumji, Zamfara State, around 64 civilians killed in an airstrike. January 2023, Rukubi, Doma, Nasarawa State, 39 to 40 civilians killed. January 2023, Galadima Kogo in Niger State, 18 vigilante members killed, 8,000 displaced. December 2023, Tundu Biri, Kaduna State, 85 civilians killed, 60 plus injured during a Muslim religious celebration. The strike was based on pattern of life analysis. They were watching from above, saw a gathering and bombed it. This was a religious festival. Then September 2024, in Kaduna State, 23 villagers were killed, including children at a mosque and market. Beyond airstrikes, Amnesty International documented about 7,000 people killed by Nigerian military between 2011 and 2015. At least 10,000 civilians died in Nigerian military custody after detention for Boko Haram connections between 2011 to 2021. The Nigerian government established over 20 inquiries between 2009 and 2018 into military abuses. But according to human rights organizations, these inquiries don't lead anywhere. US training programs provided over 41,000 training courses to Nigerian military personnel between 2000 and 2022. The training included international military education and training on law of armed conflict. There were joint terminal attack controller training, yet a 2024 investigation by the Center for Civilians in Conflict found the training wasn't operationalized. The report stated that there is a lack of real-time communication between ground forces and aircraft. Ground and air forces are unable to communicate directly. They must play a game of telephone. No data capabilities are deployed in the field despite training. Intelligence remains scarce. Legal advisors don't participate in targeting processes. There are no shared procedures to estimate anticipated civilian harm. Most operations are reported to be dynamic, ad hoc, rather than pre-planned. The report concluded saying, training individuals is insufficient without institutional reforms. Continued reports of civilian harm despite US training indicate gaps in implementation. And then when you come back to the Lehi law, which prohibits assistance to foreign military units credibly implicated in human rights violations, you find that this law has been inconsistently applied. Some Nigerian units have been vetted and blocked from receiving assistance. But the vetting process allows units to be reconstituted with new personnel, creating clean units that can receive aid while the same commanders remain in charge. Broader military cooperation continues regardless. The Child Soldiers Prevention Act listed Nigeria for using child soldiers in 2015 to 2018 and 2020 to 2021. The State Department waived prohibitions every year, allowing aid to continue despite violations. From bases in Niger, now closed, US drones conducted surveillance over northeastern Nigeria. The Ran airstrike that killed 115 civilians was based partly on intelligence from what Nigerian media described as one of the powerful countries in the West, reportedly the United States. US officials knew Nigerian forces had a pattern of civilian casualties. They provided intelligence anyway. Intelligence that led to the killings of innocent civilians. A 2022 report by Brown University, Security Assistance Monitor and Interaction summarized that despite 20 years of US assistance. Nigerian armed forces have not only failed to defeat militants, but routinely commit grave human rights abuses without repercussions from the United States. Boko Haram and Splinter Group remain operational. Approximately 39,000 deaths and 3.3 plus million displaced since 2009. The Nigerian military is increasingly unable to contend with the insurgency's extraordinary resilience. The report's core findings showed US assistance has failed its stated objectives, which is defeating terrorist threats and improving civilian protection, while also enabling a military that kills civilians with impunity. And here is the crucial point. The same politicians and advocacy groups now calling for US intervention to protect Nigerian Christians have been largely silent about American complicity in civilian deaths. The silence reveals what matters, not Nigerian lives, but the narrative. Christian victims serve the intervention agenda. Muslim victims complicate it. Civilians killed by the US-backed Nigerian military are inconvenient, so they ignored it. But the most worrying is the history of US complicity in the security crisis they now claim to care about.
All Nigerians must be able to cast their votes without intimidation or fear.
The level of interference by the Obama's government was very overwhelming.
The advocates pushing for US intervention in Nigeria want you to believe American involvement will save lives. But history says otherwise. Now, let's go through some American blueprint for catastrophe. First is Iraq 2003.
On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
The US invaded Iraq based on lies about weapons of mass destruction. Secretary of State Colin Powell told the United Nations that Iraq possessed chemical and biological weapons and was pursuing nuclear capabilities. Well, none of it was true. The invasion succeeded in toppling Saddam Hussein in 3 weeks. What came after was catastrophic. Between 150,000 and over 1 million Iraqis died, depending on methodology. 4,419 US soldiers were killed. $119 billion spent through 2015, another $6 to $8 billion lost to waste and fraud. The occupation created the conditions for ISIS to emerge from the chaos. Sectarian violence consumed the country. Iran gained influence. American objectives failed completely. And then we had the private military contractors that played central role. Blackwater received over $832 million in contracts. At the peak, contractors made up 1 in 4 armed personnel. Blackwater operated with legal immunity under Coalition Provisional Authority Order 17. They couldn't be prosecuted under Iraqi law. 20 years later, Iraq remains politically unstable with strong Iranian influence, the opposite of stated US objectives. Before the Iraq invasion, there was Afghanistan. For 2 decades, the Americans were in Afghanistan between 2001 to 2021. 2 decades, $2 trillion, total failure. The US invaded Afghanistan to destroy Al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban government that harbored them. 20 years later, however, the Taliban retook the entire country within days of US withdrawal in August 2021. Over 70,000 Afghan security forces killed, tens of thousands of civilians lay dead, 2,219 US military deaths, over $2 trillion spent. The Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction documented billions in waste. A $34 million command headquarters built but never occupied. $772 million for aircrafts Afghans cannot operate and maintain. Nearly $2 billion in questionable spending uncovered in just 3 months of 2013. At the peak, 137,000 private contractors operated in Afghanistan, outnumbering US troops. Most were third countries nationals, recruited from impoverished countries. This included former child soldiers. The outcome? The Taliban is back in power. Women's rights eliminated, democratic institutions failed, Afghan National Army disintegrated in days. The same script played out in Libya. In this instance, humanitarian intervention turned to state collapse. NATO intervened in Libya in 2011, ostensibly to prevent Gaddafi from massacring civilians in Benghazi. Before the intervention, there were approximately 1,000 deaths in the first month. However, post-intervention, at least 7,000 to 8,000 additional deaths as the war extended 7 months. NATO flew 26,500 sorties, including 7,000 bombing runs. The operation exceeded its UN mandate, evolved into regime change, and Obama later called it his failure to plan for the day after his worst mistake. Libya became a failed state. The country now hosts ISIS presence, serves as a human trafficking hub. 800,000 plus need humanitarian assistance out of 7 million population. Up to 15,000 man-portable missiles are unaccounted for, spreading to radical Islamists across the Sahel. Harvard analysis found the intervention magnified conflict duration 6-fold and death toll 7-fold. Weapons from Libya's collapsed arsenals flooded into Nigeria, Mali, Niger, and Chad, and directly contributed to Boko Haram's increasing lethality after 2011. And then there is Somalia. Decades of intervention, endless failure since 1992's Black Hawk Down incidents. The US has conducted multiple interventions in Somalia. Post 9/11, the US conducted 282 plus counter-terrorism operations and backed Ethiopia's 2006 invasion that overthrew the Islamic Court Union. Unintentionally, this created Al-Shabaab as a major threat. The US has spent $2.5 billion plus on counter-terrorism assistance since 2007. Al-Shabaab now wages one of the largest and deadliest insurgencies in the world. They conducted major external attacks. 2010 Uganda bombing with 74 dead, 2013 Nairobi mall attack with 67 dead. They formally joined Al-Qaeda in 2012. A 2023 Cost of War project study found US spending exceeds Somali government revenue. Funds are diverted from peace building to military operations. US trained forces are misused for Somali elites, and militant groups proliferated following US counter-terrorism efforts in the country. The pattern is consistent. Stated objectives are rarely achieved. Humanitarian costs exceed benefits. Extremist groups end up being strengthened. Massive financial waste, contractor accountability void, no post-intervention planning. Yet, they push for Nigerian intervention, proceeds as if this history doesn't exist. So again, who stands to benefit from this cause for intervention? To understand what is at stake in Nigeria, you need to know about the man who wants to send mercenaries there.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens. And if so many of these countries around the world are incapable of governing themselves, then it's time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries.
Eric Prince, a former Navy SEAL, billionaire heir, brother of Betsy DeVos, and founder of the most controversial private military company in modern history. But what is this Blackwater about? Prince founded Blackwater USA on December 26, 1997 with Al Clark. He purchased 7,000 acres in North Carolina's Great Dismal Swamp and built a $6.5 million training facility. After 9/11, Blackwater exploded into one of the world's largest private military companies. In August 2003, Blackwater received a $21 million no-bid contract to protect Coalition Provisional Authority head Paul Bremer in Iraq. Between July 2004 and June 2006, the company received $488 million despite a contract maximum of $332 million. The second worldwide personal protective services contract between 2006 and 2009 authorized 1,020 personnel with a maximum value of $1.2 billion. By 2006, Blackwater had received over $832 million from the State Department. Total government contracts exceeded $1 billion. The business model relied on recruiting from a pool of 21,000 former special forces and law enforcement personnel. These were predominantly white men in their 40s, many former Delta Force, SEALs, and Rangers. The State Department paid Blackwater $1,222 per guard per day. That is $444,000 per year compared to approximately $70,000 annually for a US soldier. Prince defended the cause by noting contractors came with specialized training, required no long-term benefits, and provided flexibility. But the business came with a body count. Between 2005 and September 2007, Blackwater was involved in 195 shooting incidents in Iraq. Blackwater fired first in 163 cases. The company operated with legal immunity under CPA Order 17, which granted all Americans associated with the Coalition Provisional Authority immunity from Iraqi law. September 16, 2007. A Blackwater convoy opens fire in Nizal Square, a busy Baghdad traffic circle. Guards claimed they were ambushed. Iraqi witnesses said they fired without provocation at a car that didn't stop quickly enough. 17 Iraqi civilians were killed, 20 wounded. Iraq revoked Blackwater's license. The license was later reinstated in April 2008, then refused renewal in 2009. In October 2014, 4 contractors were convicted: Nicholas Slatting of first-degree murder, Paul Slaw, Ivan Liberty, and Dustin Heard of manslaughter and weapons charges. Sentences ranged from 30 years to life imprisonment. On December 22, 2020, President Trump pardoned all 4. UN experts condemned these pardons as an affront to justice that violates US obligations under international law, but nobody cared. The controversies forced rebrandings. In February 2009, it was renamed Exi Services Limited. In 2011, renamed Academy. 2014, merged with Triple Canopy to form Constellis Holdings. Prince officially left operational roles but founded new ventures like Frontier Resources Group in 2012. In recent years, Prince has proposed or deployed private military operations in the UAE, where he helped set up foreign mercenary forces. In Libya, in 2019, he proposed an $80 million deal with Khalifa Haftar. In Venezuela in 2024, he supported opposition proposing private army. In Haiti, around March 2025 till present, Vector Global has 10-year government contract, over 300 reportedly killed in this country. In Ecuador in 2025, there are partnership with President Noboa. In Democratic Republic of Congo, there are deals to secure mineral wealth. And then in El Salvador, it is reported that he has a close relationship with President Bukele. Prince runs the Off Leash podcast and maintains a private WhatsApp group with 400 plus members coordinating mercenary operations globally. And he remains a Trump ally and shadow advisor. But how does he fit into the Nigerian narrative? Well, in early 2014, Prince allegedly met with Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan. It is alleged that he proposed to deploy foreign contractors to fight Boko Haram. This proposal, made through Frontier Resources Group, was estimated at $1.5 billion. According to investigative reporting by The Intercept and BuzzFeed News, 3 sources described the meeting differently. Some sources stated that Prince proposed a mercenary fighting force, non-Nigerian foreign fighters who would lead combat operations against Boko Haram. Another source claimed they were familiar with Prince's version and said it was a police force for Nigeria's northeast and not military. Prince's lawyer Victoria Atonsing reportedly described it as a proposal to fix roads and not military related. The Intercept revealed internal proposal from Prince and his team that explicitly promised to confront sabotage and theft of Nigerian oil, provide VIP protection for Nigerian officials, engage in counter-insurgency activities, conduct air attacks in northeast Nigeria against Boko Haram. The outcome of these meetings were said to be murky. 2 sources stated Nigeria declined the proposal. One source claimed Nigeria agreed to do business with Prince. But what is confirmed, however, is that Nigeria subsequently hired South African mercenaries led by Ibn Balo for anti-Boko Haram operations. 2 sources close to Prince said he believed Balo stole his contract and Prince was smoking hot about it. Well, at African Energy Week 2025 in Cape Town, Prince spoke publicly about Nigeria's oil security. He called Nigeria's oil pipeline theft the single largest organized crime in the world, claiming, quote, more than 500,000 barrels a day were stolen there, organized by very large criminal syndicates. He alleged there's even some evidence is going to fund terrorist organizations. Prince's interest in Nigeria is clear. But you know what else is clear? How he sees Nigerians. Listen to what he has to say about Africans in general.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens, because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris.
In October 2025, Prince made a social media appeal to Pope Leo requesting funding for private military protection of Nigerian Christians. But Will this military protection for Nigerian Christians stop at that, or is there more to it? In March 2016, The Intercept reported Prince was under investigation by the Department of Justice for attempting to broker military services to foreign governments without proper licensing, possible money laundering, and violations of international traffic in arms regulations. The investigation specifically included Prince's Nigerian proposal. US defense export regulations require Americans offering military services to countries like Nigeria to obtain State Department licenses. US intelligence monitored Prince's communications and movements for over a year. The outcome of the DOJ investigation has not been publicly disclosed. A confidential 2021 United Nations report accused Prince of violating a UN arms embargo by sending foreign mercenaries and weapons to Libyan commander Khalifa Haftar in 2019. No charges were filed by the DOJ in this case. Prince has not been criminally charged for any of his other alleged offenses either. In fact, in February 2020, the Wall Street Journal reported that the DOJ was in the late stages of deciding whether to charge Prince for lying to Congress and for ITAR violations related to his overseas business dealings. However, this did not result in any indictment. A 2021 lawsuit by Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington sought records of meetings between Prince and Attorney General Bela, suggesting the DOJ might have shown preferential treatment to Trump allies during its investigations. But why is he interested in Nigeria? Why Nigeria? Prince's pattern across Africa reveals a consistent model. Identify a security crisis in a resource-rich country, propose private military solutions, frame it as counter-terrorism or anti-crime, position contractors as superior to government forces. Nigeria fits perfectly. Boko Haram provides the security crisis. Oil and critical minerals provide resource wealth. Christian persecution provides moral justification. Government failures provide opening for privatization. The mercenary is cycling. The proposal is on the table. The infrastructure exists already. All that is missing is funding and political authorization. For Eric Prince and the private military industry, Nigeria represents the perfect opportunity. There is security crisis at scale. Nigeria faces multiple simultaneous security threats across different regions. Boko Haram and ISWAP in the northeast, armed Fulani militants in the Middle Belt, banditry in the northwest. Each conflict could justify distinct private military contracts. The Nigerian military and police, despite billions in assistance, have proven unable to effectively address these threats. This creates a gap that private contractors can then exploit, positioning themselves as more efficient alternatives. And there is precedent for this. In 2015, Nigeria quietly hired contractors, ex-Soviet pilots and South African special forces to fight Boko Haram because they couldn't get timely help elsewhere. Those contractors inflicted heavy losses on Boko Haram. This was proof of concept. Mercenaries can make a difference in Nigeria's terrain, at least temporarily. All they needed was the right framing, the right narrative. Religious framing and funding the Christian genocide narrative provides powerful justification that mobilizes funding beyond government contracts. Religious organizations, evangelical groups, and individual donors moved by persecution reports represent potential funding streams. Prince's appeal to Pope Leo explicitly invoked this model. Religious institutions funding private military protection for co-religionists. Imagine a coalition of Nigerian Christian organizations fearing genocide, pulling funds to bring in Prince's forces. It's not far-fetched. And for Prince, Nigeria would be a safe haven to operate without restraint. Nigeria's weak rule of law, corruption, and limited state capacity create an environment where private contractors could operate with minimal oversight. The Iraqi experience demonstrated contractors' preference for jurisdictions with weak legal frameworks. Nigeria's judicial system, already overwhelmed and compromised by corruption, would likely prove unable to effectively regulate or punish contractor abuses. Even when contractors are convicted, as with Nizal Square, political intervention can erase consequences. For contractors, Nigeria offers profitable operations with minimal risk of punishment. Also, there are natural resources to consider. Nigeria's oil fields, gas reserves, and critical mineral deposits all require protection. Current security relies on Nigerian forces and existing private security firms. Expanded conflict could justify bringing in American contractors, potentially displacing current providers and capturing lucrative protective services contracts. When this works, it becomes proof of concept for other military expeditions across Africa. Establishing operations in Nigeria provides a foothold for expanding across West Africa. The region faces interconnected security challenges. Companies that embed in Nigeria could use it as a base for regional operations. Princess Ventures have consistently pursued this hub strategy. Operations in one location enable expansion throughout a region. For the United States, this removes a certain restraint on military assistance. The Leahy law restrictions that limit US military assistance to Nigerian units accused of human rights violation don't directly apply to private contractors. By privatizing security operations, American involvement can proceed without triggering legal restrictions that constrain official assistance. Contractors can work with or alongside Nigerian forces ineligible for direct US military support, effectively laundering American military capabilities through private companies. But why go through the stress to do all of that for a country you care so little about? Well, the answer here is intelligence gathering. Private contractors inevitably gather extensive intelligence about terrain, political dynamics, resource locations, ethnic tensions. This intelligence has commercial value. It can be shared with government clients, corporate partners, also to interested parties. In Nigeria, intelligence about mineral deposits, oil field security, political rivalries would be valuable to multiple constituencies. So, you see, the convergence of factors makes Nigeria irresistible. Massive security market, resource wealth, moral justification through religious persecution narrative, weak accountability, proven willingness to hire contractors, and potential for regional expansion. For Prince and the private military industry, Nigeria isn't a humanitarian crisis. It is a business opportunity worth billions. So, what does America really want here? Nigeria is not a charity case for the United States. It is a strategic prize. Understanding what America stands to gain illuminates why powerful interests push for deeper engagement despite failures of past interventions. Number one is oil. Nigeria holds 36 billion barrels of proven oil reserves and produces 1.3 to 1.6 million barrels per day, although down from its 2.4 million barrel per day peak, but this is still substantial. American companies dominate this sector. We have Chevron Nigeria, which operates 40% interest in 8 Niger Delta concessions, producing 78,000 barrels per day from Delta operations and 44,000 barrels per day from the Agbami field, one of Nigeria's largest deepwater discoveries. The company controls 2.9 million oil and gas acres. ExxonMobil operates as Nigeria's second largest crude producer through 5 deepwater blocks, 90 plus platforms, and 300 plus producing wells covering 3,200 square kilometers. In 2024, the US imported $4.46 billion worth of crude oil from Nigeria, making Nigeria the 9th largest US crude import source and accounting for 62% of US crude imports from Africa. This trade relationship remains strategically significant as diversification from Middle East volatility. Nigeria's light, sweet crude is preferred by US Gulf Coast refineries. But now, it appears the US is not the only powerful country with interest in Nigeria anymore. China's Belt and Road Initiative engagement in Nigeria totals $20 billion through 160 plus Chinese companies, employing 200,000 plus Nigerians. Major Chinese infrastructure projects include the Kaduna-Kano Railway, which is $1.7 billion, Lagos-Kano Railway, $6.7 billion, Lagos-Ibadan Railway, $1.5 billion, the Mambila Hydroelectric Plant, $4.9 billion, is partially funded by China. Nigeria-China trade expanded from $1.2 billion in 2003 to $13.7 billion in 2019. While Nigeria decreased trade with the US from $11.5 billion to $7.5 billion during the same period. Brookings analysis found China is the dominant economic partner in 27 sub-Saharan African countries versus 9 for the United States. That is concerning, especially with the race for access to critical minerals. You see, Nigeria produced 13,000 metric tons of rare earth elements in 2024, up 80% from 2023, from estimated reserves of 6 million tons of ore. The country holds significant deposits of lithium, tantalite, columbite, nickel, cobalt, and graphite. Nigeria's Minister of Solid Minerals Development estimates total solid minerals value exceeds $700 billion. They have announced processing investment in 2024 to include $600 million lithium plant in Kaduna, Niger border, $200 million lithium plant near Abuja, another $600 million lithium plant in Nasarawa, $400 million rare earth processing facility targeting 18,000 metric tons per year capacity. The global rare earth elements market is valued at $3.7 billion in 2024 and projected to exceed $8 billion by 2032. This industry is dominated by Chinese processing. US tech sector competitiveness depends on mineral access outside Chinese control. China's 2025 first half BRI engagement reached $66.2 billion, the highest level ever, with Nigeria as a major recipient. So the US cannot afford to cede these resources to Beijing. There's also the military interest. Nigeria's position provides access to West and Central Africa. The Gulf of Guinea is critical for maritime security. In 2021, late President Muhammadu Buhari asked the US to relocate AFRICOM headquarters from Stuttgart, Germany to West Africa, citing proximity to Boko Haram operations. Well, AFRICOM remains in Germany, but the request revealed Nigeria's willingness to host expanded US military presence. Now, with recent coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, Nigeria becomes relatively more important as a stable democracy and US partner in an unstable region. Nigeria founded the Economic Community of West African States in 1975 and accounts for over 50% of ECOWAS population, that is 200 million or 400 million, and approximately 50% of ECOWAS GDP as well. Nigeria pays about 50% of the ECOWAS budget and has historically led ECOMOG peacekeeping forces. The US works through ECOWAS for regional crisis response. Strong Nigerian leadership provides multilateral legitimacy for US regional policy. Every major US interest converges in Nigeria. Energy security for diversifying oil imports beyond the Middle East, great power competition with China for economic and political influence in Africa's largest economy, critical minerals access for the energy transition, reducing dependence on Chinese-controlled supply chains, counter-terrorism architecture through Nigeria's regional leadership and military cooperation. There's also the regional stability mechanisms via ECOWAS, which Nigeria anchors, and there are commercial opportunities in Africa's most populous nation and largest market. According to the US State Department, the US-Nigeria relationship is among the most important in sub-Saharan Africa, given Nigeria's status as Africa's most populous country, largest economy, and shared democratic values. So with all of these facts taken into consideration, do you now see how a US-led intervention in Nigeria serves those concerned? This investigation began with a question: who benefits from framing Nigeria's complex security crisis as Christian genocide requiring American intervention? The evidence reveals a coordinated network of Republican politicians, religious freedom advocacy organizations, conservative think tanks, and private military contractors, pushing a narrative that simplifies Nigeria's multi-causal violence into a story of religious persecution. But the truth is far more complex. Both Christians and Muslims suffer and die in Nigeria from terrorism, banditry, resource conflicts, and state failure. The genocide designation lacks support from authoritative legal bodies. The narrative emerged through deliberate advocacy campaigns spanning 15 years. ACLED data from January 2020 to September 2025 shows 20,409 civilian deaths. Only 317 occurred in attacks specifically targeting Christians. 417 occurred in attacks specifically targeting Muslims. The vast majority, 19,775 deaths, occurred in attacks where religion was not the primary motivation. And we know those pushing the narratives. Senator Ted Cruz, Representative Chris Smith, USCIRF Commissioners, Hudson Institute's Nina Shear, Family Research Council's Tony Parkins, Open Doors International, International Christian Concern, Genocide Watch, and they are funded by conservative foundations, including the Prince Devils Family, Wilkes Brothers, National Christian Foundation, Donors Capital Fund, Bradley Foundation. They all shared personnel, moving between government commissions, think tanks, and advocacy organizations. They coordinated messaging, aligned testimony, sort of an echo chamber amplification. While some of the voices calling for intervention might be genuine, we know what the Americans want. Oil and gas worth billions, controlled by Chevron and ExxonMobil, competition with China's $20 billion Belt and Road investments, access to critical minerals worth $700+ billion, counter-terrorism architecture, regional military presence, commercial opportunities. Every major interest converges here: energy, security, great power competition, critical minerals, counter-terrorism infrastructure, and regional influence. How about the character signaling interest in carrying out the operation? He is not new to conflict zones. We have his rap sheet: founder of Blackwater, Nizel Square massacre, Trump pardons, corporate rebranding, DOJ investigation for illegal arms brokering, current operations in Haiti, Ecuador, DRC, and El Salvador. His former company still maintains a corporate presence in Nigeria. He is looking to establish a pattern across Africa: security crisis plus resource wealth plus moral justification plus government failure. This gives you privatization opportunity. The mercenary is cycling. But for ordinary Nigerians, farmers in the Middle Belt, traders in the Northeast, families displaced by violence, Christians and Muslims both burying their dead, the question: would American intervention help or harm them? History suggests it would transform a complex crisis into humanitarian catastrophe. It will enrich contractors while failing to protect civilians and leave Nigeria more unstable. Yes, Nigeria needs governance reforms, economic development, conflict resolution mechanisms. The country is in dire need of accountability for perpetrators, not Blackwater mercenaries, not drone strikes, not sanctions weakening the state, not becoming another theater for great power competition. The violence in Nigeria is real. The suffering is immense. The need for solutions is urgent. But the story being told, the narrative of Christian genocide requiring American intervention, is not the entire truth. It is a carefully constructed framework serving interests with little to do with protecting Nigerian lives. This narrative is built. The advocacy is coordinated. The interests are strategic. History predicts failure for this. The people who will pay the price are the same people the intervention claims to save, which are the ordinary Nigerians. They deserve better than to become the latest experiment in American military adventurism. Nigeria should not be another country sacrificed at the altar of oil, minerals, and empire wrapped in the language of humanitarian concern. Nigerians deserve better.